Have you ever stopped to think about how life often seems out of control? Sometimes you plan your day, your week, maybe even your month, but in the end, things don't go as expected. It's like being on an emotional roller coaster, pulled in all directions without really knowing where you're headed. In these moments, feelings of frustration, exhaustion, and even despair can surface, right? After all, who hasn't felt powerless in the face of something that seemed bigger than them? The truth is, no matter how hard we try, we can't always control everything around us. And that's okay. So often, we pressure ourselves to have absolute control over every area of our lives. It feels like if something goes wrong, it must be due to a lack of planning or dedication. But if we pause to reflect, we'll realize that uncertainty is a part of life, and it actually creates space for the unexpected. And sometimes that unpredictability can be a positive thing. The unexpected can bring lessons and opportunities we never could have anticipated. What I'm trying to say is this: maybe it's not about trying to control everything, but instead about choosing where to invest our energy. Have you ever thought about that? Maybe the secret lies in accepting that things won't always go as planned, and rather than fighting against that, we can focus on what's actually within our reach. When we learn to direct our attention toward what we can do, instead of worrying about what we can't change, something really interesting happens. We start to feel lighter. It's like, little by little, we allow ourselves to take a deep breath and look at life from a different perspective. After all, trying to control the uncontrollable is like trying to hold sand in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips away. Imagine you're caught in a storm. What would you do? Fight the rain? Try to control the strength of the wind? Or would you find shelter and wait for the right moment to move forward? Life is a bit like that. Many of the events around us are beyond our control, and resisting them only creates more frustration. But when we choose to focus on what we can control, we find that even amidst chaos, we still have the power to act, to make choices. We live in a world where it often feels like we need to be in control of everything. Controlling our time, our plans, our emotions, and the people around us. But what if I told you that this is an illusion? That in reality, most of what happens day to day is beyond our control. And that's okay? Let's think about this together. How many times have you tried to make something go exactly as planned, only to have reality take a completely different course? How many times have you been stuck in situations that you couldn't change, yet still tried to force things to go your way? A lot of our frustration comes from spending energy on things we can't change. The traffic that makes you late, someone else's reaction, an unexpected problem that derails your plans. These things are inevitable, and trying to control every detail becomes a constant source of stress. However, when you start focusing on what you can control, that feeling of helplessness begins to fade. It's like letting go of the need for control frees you from an emotional burden that was only weighing you down. Now, I invite you to a reflection. What if, instead of fighting against what's out of your reach, you focused on what you can actually control? It sounds simple, but the truth is, this shift in focus can completely change how you handle challenges. Let me give you an example. Think about a typical day. You wake up, you have your goals and tasks planned, but then something unexpected happens. Maybe it's a call with news you didn't expect, a problem at work, or even something as small as traffic making you late for a meeting. What do? The first reaction many times is to get frustrated, feel angry, or even blame something or someone. But does that help? Does it really improve the situation? When you start focusing on what you can control, that feeling of powerlessness fades. If something went wrong, what can you do now? Maybe you can't change what happened, but you can choose how to react. You can decide what your next step will be. Small decisions, small actions can have a much bigger impact than we imagine. By focusing on what's within our reach, our energy shifts towards something positive. And more importantly, this brings inner peace. Because when we accept that we can't control everything, but that we have the power to act within our scope, we stop wearing ourselves down with things we can't change. This change in perspective also brings a new understanding of what it means to succeed. Success isn't necessarily having complete control over everything around you. it's how you handle situations that go beyond your control. With this new perspective, your relationship with the world becomes lighter and more fluid. Accepting that not everything is under our control is one of the biggest challenges we face. It's natural to want things to happen the way we imagined. We plan, dream, and create expectations. And when reality doesn't match up, our first instinct is to resist. To resist what happened, to try to bring things back under control, as if we could somehow undo what has already passed. But does that really work? Or does this resistance only increase our frustration? Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. On the contrary, acceptance is an act of courage, of maturity. It's recognizing that, no matter how hard we try, not everything is up to us. Some things just happen, and instead of fighting against it, we can learn to accept it. To accept that life often takes a path we didn't foresee. And when we stop resisting, we find a strength we didn't know we had. It's important to remember that acceptance is not the same as passivity. Accepting what cannot be changed allows us to redirect our energy toward what can be done. Instead of wasting time and effort dwelling on what's already happened, we can move forward with more clarity and purpose. When we accept, we create the space necessary to look at life with a more realistic and constructive perspective. It's in that moment that we discover resilience. Think for a moment about all the times you fixated on something that didn't go as planned. Maybe it was a missed opportunity, a mistake you made, or a situation you couldn't control. Now think about what has changed since then. Time has probably passed, things continued to unfold, and in some way you kept moving forward. The question is, what if, back then, you had accepted it sooner? How much of your energy would have been saved? How much suffering could have been avoided? Acceptance also brings with it the understanding that not everything is personal. We often tend to believe that adversities are direct results of our actions, or that they are some sort of punishment. But in accepting reality, we realize that the universe doesn't revolve around our desires or mistakes. Accepting life's unpredictability gives us strength that goes beyond mere reaction. It's an act of empowerment. Emotions are a part of who we are. They move us, motivate us, and connect us with the world and with the people around us. But sometimes, they can feel overwhelming, right? It can seem like suddenly we're taken over by anger, sadness, or fear. And when that happens, it's easy to get lost in those emotions, as if they were bigger than we are. But what if you could observe your emotions instead of being ruled by them? Emotions are like internal compasses that help us understand what's happening inside. When we ignore or suppress those emotions, we miss the chance to get to know ourselves better. On the other hand, if we let them take over, we lose control of our own reactions. The true strength lies in learning to observe emotions with curiosity, without judgment. This gives us the ability to choose how to respond, rather than being swept away by emotional intensity. Think of your emotions like the weather. It's not always sunny, sometimes it rains, sometimes the wind is strong. But just like the weather, emotions change too. They come, they stay for a while, and eventually they pass. And when you learn to observe your emotions without clinging to them, you begin to see that they don't define you. The sadness you feel today isn't who you are. The anger you experienced yesterday doesn't define you. These are just temporary states. The next time you feel a strong emotion, try something different. Instead of fighting against it or letting it overwhelm you, just observe it. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And without judgment, simply allow yourself to feel it. Observe how this emotion shows up in your body, in your mind. And remember, just like all other emotions, this one will pass too. Life is full of surprises. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're challenging. And no matter how much we try, we can't always control everything that happens. But what we can control is how we choose to respond. In every moment, we have the opportunity to decide where to place our energy. We can choose to focus on what's within our reach, we can accept what we cannot change, and we can observe our emotions without being ruled by them. These choices, though simple, have the power to transform the way we live. Because deep down, real strength isn't about controlling the world around us, but learning to live with what life offers. When we accept this, we find that no matter what happens, we can find peace, calm, and clarity. Thank you for joining me up to this point. I hope that in some way these words have helped you see life in a slightly lighter way. And remember, you always have a choice. Choose what you can control, accept what you can't, and observe your emotions. Peace is always within reach. You just have to allow it in.